Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the 53rd episode of Analytics Wednesday, where we are very privileged to have Mr. Manish Pipalia, the advisor for SAMA Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited, speak to us on CaseWare Working Papers for External Audit. SAMA Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited have been at the forefront of technologies on data analytics, legal compliance management solutions. We have our flagship product, CaseWare Idea. We have Lex Comply, Alisa for continuous monitoring. And in April 2021, we brought on board CaseWare Working Papers and represent them in the region. And today we have a very experienced speaker who would share his knowledge and insights with us on working papers for external audit. Let me introduce the speaker, Mr. Manish Pipalia, to all of us, and then I'll hand over the floor and the session to him. Mr. Manish Pipalia is a partner in Pipalia Singhal and Associates and also an advisor to SAMA Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited. He's a graduate in commerce, an FCA, a CIA, and he's also a certified enterprise risk assessor trainer from Methodware, New Zealand. He's completed the certified Drucker curriculum training and has also completed the CISA course from Osaka. He's been very extensively involved in setting up risk management framework mechanisms, reviewing internal control structures, internal audit services, business consultancy services, design of systems, policies, procedures, and working extensively in risk-based internal audit practices across the region. He has also jointly authored a number of papers, books with the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, with the Institute of Internal Auditors, Florida, USA, and also with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India on internal audit and risk management. There are a number of columns which he has co-authored and authored with the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, and a leading publication on internal audit assurance, governance, risk, and control, a publication through CCH or Walter Kluwer's company. So we're very happy to have all of you all with us. We are happy to have Mr. Manish Pipalia with us. And this event is supported by the Government of Canada Trade Commissioner Service. So over to you, Mr. Manish Pipalia. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Rajesh. Thank you, Jairam, for that introduction, and truly appreciate your being there with us today evening on this subject of working papers. As we all know that the role of the statutory auditor or the external auditor has become quite prominent and onerous, with a number of regulatory developments that have taken place and so on. And the auditors, the emphasis and the focus on the auditors has increased tremendously. The responsibility on the teams, right from the junior most member to the partner in charge and the quality partner also, has become more and more distinct, defined, and focused upon. So I think it's in that context that we are having this session, where we are seeking to look at how exactly technology could be leveraged across for these audits that are there. And we take our journey from the environmental drivers onto certain practices that are currently on, and from there move on to the option that we have of CaseWare Working Papers as such. Let me share my screen now and take you all through the presentation. So this is the presentation that I'm going to be making on, and I'll very briefly walk you all through maybe the last 5 minutes or so through the option or the solution that exists. So primarily, if you look at the auditing environment that we have today, I mean, what are the drivers? There are two key drivers. While the auditors are primarily covered by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, the National Financial Reporting Authority has been playing an active role since 2018 in terms of monitoring the quality of audits that are happening on. So their authority is driven from Section 132 of the Companies Act, which requires NAFRA to monitor and enforce compliance with accounting standards and auditing standards. So the emphasis over here is the focus on the implementation of the standards. We are all familiar with the standards as they are existing, as they are promoted by the institute. There are a number of certificate programs that they hold and everything else. So NAFRA's role in monitoring and enforcement, and they have come out with some reports that we'll cover up in the next few slides. So the purpose of this monitoring, as Rule 8 of NAFRA mentions, is to review working papers, including audit plan and other documents and communications related to the audit. And this is the area where the relevance of our subject today is. Evaluate the sufficiency of the quality control system of the auditor and the manner of documentation of the system by the auditors. So these two elements together is where we are going to be looking at the subject today, and perform such as the testing of the audit, quality control procedures, etc., as appropriate. So friends, in this context, we are going to be talking about the subject today. Now, NAFRA has been reviewing some of the audits that have been performed, and the most prominent being the ILFS, which every one of us would have heard about. There were certain points which are made by NAFRA in their audit quality report that they have issued, and I've just tried to collate them together over here to emphasize and to reinforce the fact, why is it necessary that we look at technology seriously, not just from a compliance or a regulation point of view, but primarily from enhancing and improving our audit quality. The entire focus is on how can our audit quality improve, how can we be more efficient in terms of our execution and performance, and thereby have a good night's sleep on. So there are several points, and I'll just quickly walk you all through them. Primarily, in their report, they have mentioned that the initial appointment itself was prima facie illegal and void. The audit firm has failed to appropriately and sufficiently evaluate the use of the going concern basis. Now, when we read through the report, some of us may feel that these are quite obvious elements which should have been taken care of. But in a live environment, there are a number of such specific points which might have missed out or might have been not followed through. In assessing the risk of material misstatement, the audit firm did not discuss the susceptibility of the financial statement to material misstatements due to fraud. The element of identifying serious potential risk and adopting a concentrated risk-based audit approach in the performance of the external audits also is something which was highlighted by them. There's also a mention about fail to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to justify the valuation of investment. The audit firm had not evaluated the work done by the management's expert, and therefore their reporting under CARO is in violation of the requirements and so on. The audit firm has not determined the persons comprising those charged with governance. There was no communication that was found relating to the independence, the relationships that the auditors had with the firm, and the network firms, and so on and so forth. Failed to maintain documents as per SA 230. Therefore, the integrity of the audit file was also questionable, tampering, inconsistency pointed out. And in most cases to SAs, which have a direct bearing on the issues under consideration, there were generally applicable requirements of the SAs, such as the need to exercise professional skepticism, the need to obtain sufficient evidence, performance of procedures. All of these are integral in all cases, and they have been discussed in the AQRR as not specifically followed. And based on the conclusions, we'll just focus on the bold parts. The audit firm has failed to meet the requirements of SA 700. the audit firm did not have any justification for issuing the audit report. It made tantamount to the auditor making a deliberately false declaration in his report. The audit firm has failed to achieve the central purpose of audit. Very harsh words, very strong terminology, and the reading apparently makes us think that the basics of audit as we understand appears not to have been followed through. Now that friends is a very scathing critic of the work done by the audit firms. Now, simultaneously, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has also come out with audit quality reports. Now, under NAFRA, Institute may undertake such an activity going forward from 18 onwards if NAFRA were to ask them to do it. But they had done this for the period of 1213 to 1920. And they had reviewed a large number of engagements across for that period. If you look at the right-hand pie, only 34% of the findings that were reviewed, of the engagements that were reviewed, they found that it was generally acceptable. There were improvements required in 66% of the engagements that they have reviewed over the span of 12 to 20, so around 9 year span. Now that is indicative of the need for the firms to basically build on their strengths and ensure that they are in a better position to meet the compliance expectations of the regulations, meet the expectations of the members of the companies that they are auditing, as well as achieve a level of professional due diligence and professional achievement that is expected from the audit firms as such. Now, if you just look at this report in some details over there, now in terms of the audit quality reviews that were covered, and this is pertaining to the 3-year period from 14-15 to 16-17, in that 3-year period that they had reviewed, there was 82% where improvements were required, or nearly 85% of the engagement. So while that was a larger period, this is more from a specific period of 3 years that the institute found in all the files that they have reviewed. 85% of the engagements required either small improvements or in 3% significant improvements. Right? Now, how exactly? It's not that the auditors don't understand the field. It's more a question about how exactly are we structured, what kind of framework, our execution framework that we are adopting and we are working at, that really creates these numbers that we see over here. Now, if you just look at some of the specific terms that they have used in the area of the system, the audit quality. So when we look at standard for quality control, SQC1, the finding primarily mentions about not establishing sufficiently comprehensive and suitably designed system of quality control, considering the firm's size, nature, and complexity of firm's practice, designed to provide it with a reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel comply with professional standards and regulatory and legal requirements. Not including policies and procedures addressing each of the 6 elements, not documenting and communicating the firm's quality control processes and policies. And this is the core area where we are saying that we are not able to demonstrate, the audit firms have not been able to demonstrate how have they actually done the job, right? And that is something which really focuses upon. And there are a number of other points or areas where they have commented upon where improvements were necessary. Leadership responsibilities for quality within the firm not being correctly identified, compliance to the ethical requirements, independence, and how are they really demonstrating their independence in various elements associated with the engagements, acceptance and continuance of client relationships in specific engagements, and certain elements associated with that. The human resources, the people, the competence of the people on the field, the kind of training that has been provided to the people who actually have performed the engagements, consultation with other professionals, lawyers, valuers, other experts who may be necessary for establishing the accuracy and the validity of the numbers that are being presented, the estimates that are being made, and so on. Differences of opinion amongst clients and so on, and how exactly that has impacted the quality. The actual engagement quality control review, the effectiveness of that or the ineffectiveness of that particular role is talked about. Engagement documentation, the adequacy of the documentation availability to justify the conclusion of the attached function that has been performed. Ongoing monitoring of elements. If there have been some complaints or allegations received against the audit team members, whether we have got a mechanism in place to deal with these matters and to build on that. And agreed terms of audit engagement, quality control for an audit of financial statements, audit documentation. And I've just tried to bring out an element on the audit documentation over here. If any audit document has not been prepared properly for an important audit matter, this is not simply a deficiency of documentation, but in many cases, it could imply that the necessary audit procedures have not been implemented. Now, this is a very specific comment being made. And at the end of the day, what is available for a reviewer maybe 3 years, 5 years down the line is only that document. No element of verbal understanding of the accommodation of any explanation is going to be mattering at that point of time. And further, having a memory which is so very sharp that we could recollect what would have happened 3 or 5 years back in time is a tall order to expect. Furthermore, it also should be noted that the lack of a proper audit document usually implies, and this is extremely important for us to appreciate when we are defining our firm methodology across any practice area, and more so towards the external audit. The audit firm also has deficiencies in engagement quality control, periodic inspection, education or training, review of guidance and supervision of audit assistants and audit documents in particular, and or other areas, not just insufficiency in the knowledge and capabilities of the engagement team. And this is, I think this provides us with a whole canvas of elements that we need to sit back and introspect in each of our practice areas to see how well are we geared on each of these elements. Are we really ready for a quality control review? Are we ready for all of that? Is our documentation adequate for the evidentiary expectations of any external reviewer at any point of time? Is our audit documentation adequate to establish the conclusions that we have drawn on any of the audits that we have done on? And would it stand scrutiny across at all points of time? And these are certain elements, and these reports are available on the Institute website as well as on the NAFRA website. And y'all can read it in detail. I think it makes for some immensely interesting reading. And also, it can help us to direct our efforts at strengthening our internal processes for improvement on. Now let's appreciate what is our environment in which we are actually performing our audits. How are we actually going about doing things and so on and so forth. Now, a typical environment is where we might have some in-house developed software for office management and so on, which we are using for various activities. But largely, it's an area where we may be using Word and Excel formats. Now, typically, we had paper and pen in the past. We used to document things on. We have just translated that manual working methodology onto Word and Excel formats, right? So it's only automating or rather making it electronic, what we have been doing with paper and pen in the past. So when we talk about Word and Excel formats, yes, they are in the computer. Yes, it also has got an added advantage of being possible to be shared. And organizations have been maturing, particularly with the lockdown. I think a lot of organizations have moved on, and they have now been aggressively using OneDrive or Google Drive or MS SharePoint for file sharing as well as collaboration. So I think all in all, where we are having organizations adopting these, they are quite happy with it in the sense that they are able to extend. But there are certain negatives that exist over there. There are firms which provide extensive training, again, with the virtualization that we have of the entire work environment today, using Zoom or using Google Meet or using Teams and so on. It's easy to arrange for the team members' upgradation at all points of time. I remember back in the old days when we were article trainees and so on, our firms had these sessions on Saturdays where they would get all the groups together and talk about various elements associated with the audit, which was always useful to work on things on. And there would be certain internal systems and procedure manuals, etc., that would be working on. Now, if you look at what are the benefits of this environment that we are working on, the investment that is there, Word and Excel are necessary tools for all activities, so they are always going to be there. Now, in addition, if you have to get into a collaborative mode, there would be that additional investment for cloud storage, for collaboration tools like SharePoint, etc., that would be necessary on that. Word and Excel, everyone knows, and so there's familiarity of the software. They know how to update, they know how to review, they know how to share, etc. And it's flexibility. We can make whatever changes we want in these sheets or in these Word documents as we would require. But at the same time, if you look at this environment, what are the cons that we are actually faced with? Do we have an audit trail? Right? We may have a timestamp of the file when it was last modified, but is that adequate? When were the changes made? Who made the changes? We can have a review mode on, which establishes the changes that have been made, but then that doesn't make for a permanent record on, because you would need to accept it and you would need to ultimately share the final copy. So there's an absence of an automated audit trail about who did what, when, and so on and so forth. And friends, as you would be aware, in an audit, there's such a large amount of data which is dealt with in a very short span of time. If you have to remove all the limited reviews that are done, or maybe the interim audits, the finalization process that is there, the year-end audit that is there, is a high-pressure job done in a short span of time, and there's a large amount of documentations moving on, right? Yes, we have been given a 60-day window after the closure of the audit to ensure that a documentation is completed and so on, but still it is driven largely by the pressure at that point of time. So the absence of an automated audit trail after 3 or 5 years, when there is a query, if at all it comes up in an engagement, very difficult to identify what might have happened at that point of time. The client collaboration essentially happens by emails. So we would send an email, they'll send a feedback back. So there's a host of, it's a humongous amount of email communication that happens on a particular client. And the discipline required from each and every member to ensure that the emails are adequately maintained, they're adequately filed, they're adequately kept, and so on, is a tall order. So retrievability becomes a key issue over there. When seniors need to review what's the status of the engagement, what's happening, and so on and so forth, well, it's fragmented. They would need to wait for communication with each of the members to see. They'll have to go through the different work paper files across the teams that are there. They would need to look at the checklists that are completed and that are pending and so on, again, in a physical form, technically speaking. And that's rather fragmented. So they don't really get that sense of completeness except by inquiring with the teams, by having those group interactions and so on, and concluding that, yes, it's all completed. The reviewers don't have that insight to completeness, actual completeness of the documentation. Have we done what was necessary to be done? And the onus ultimately remains with the partner in charges. They might have the team down the line who are doing it, who are reviewing it, but the onus and the responsibility remains with the partners in charge. And this completeness of documentation would need to have a manual review. So all those box files or all those electronic files that are there across the folders, are they complete? Has everything what was expected to be done over there been done? are all the critical documentation that were promised by the clients has been received and has been made a part of the file? We definitely, there is a I would say, a hierarchy within the team. So the articles, the managers, the senior auditors, the engagement partners, and so on. But yet the granularity at which you would need to conclude things on, to have a checklist which says these are the 10 critical documents and elements that needs to be there. How do we really ensure that this is complete all the time? And that's where, if you go back to those comments that we read, the engagement quality control partner also was found wanting in the areas that were done on. So there's such a lot of granularity, such a lot of detailing that is there on. How exactly do we manage it with this particular manual environment that we are looking at? Coming to data integrity, there's such a lot of numbers that we are talking about. The numbers, and there is a rigor associated with those numbers. Now, as we would have gone through it, the first trial balance and the final trial balance, there are so many iterations that happen in between, right? Now, how do we ensure that the integrity of the data, that is all those workings that we have done, have been adequately updated, populated, and done? It requires tremendous amount of meticulousness in our teams to ensure that they are able to do that on a regular basis, but with a lot of accuracy. And that's again something which can be a difficult factor in this environment that we are talking about. We've also seen a comment from NAFRA which talked about risk. We talked about identifying risk. It's talking about that the risk of material misstatement was not considered by the teams. Now, how do we really integrate this element? This is not just the internal financial control over financial reporting that we're talking about. We are talking about the process by which the engagement team has got a robust process and mechanism of going through the phase of assessing the risk, assessing the business risk, assessing the audit risk, identifying the controls that are in place to mitigate those risks. And based on that, and based on the review of the system walkthrough and the control performance, arriving at the adequacy of the same to mitigate the risk and get the audit response on the basis of which to conclude. The quantum of work that needs to be done is so huge, the time is so short, that unless we have a structured methodology, unless we have something which gives us on an ongoing basis what needs to be done, the adequacy would always be found wanting. Now, in this scenario, there are some organizations which also use specialized software and like CaseWare Working Papers and so on, where people would be doing it in a much more structured environment. And I'm going to be sharing with you today on CaseWare Working Papers. So it's in this background that we are actually looking at this decision on technology, the thought about how do we really manage our systems, manage our methods, manage our working, so that it's all there. Coming on to CaseWare Working Papers, there are three options that are there, but I'm going to be talking about basically the hybrid option or the integrated option. Essentially, the larger work that happens on the desktop. Now, when it comes to collaboration, you need to have a collaboration environment. And that environment is provided by a SmartSync server or a cloud environment by which the synchronization can take place. And there's the absolute cloud. So you have the desktop option, there is a desktop and the cloud hybrid option, and there's a pure cloud option. The ideal option that can be adopted by firms is the hybrid cloud or the integrated option on. And we are going to be talking about that a little more. Now, let us look at, so if you've talked about the manual environment, the Word and Excel environment with the SharePoint and sharing and so on and so forth, if we are to use a solution on, how are we going to actually be benefiting on that? What kind of improvements, enhancements, demonstrable quality delivery can we really have by adopting the solution on? First and foremost and primarily, there's a permanent repository of the work done. So even with the rotation of the team members, even with having a range of competence amongst our teams that are there on, we would be in a position to ensure that there is a permanent repository and retrieving information and data is easy. The dynamic environment is the changing team members that we have, right? And in that environment to say who had done what, where would that particular last document exist, and all of that. So retrieving information and data is easy in a dynamic environment, not in a static one. There is controlled access to engagements. So there is a process by which you can ensure that users have a need to know access to the parts of the elements of the engagement on. Now, when we are looking at the solution, we are looking at templated audit performance. And in a templated audit performance, what happens is the comprehensiveness and completeness comes into our audit activity. Because the templates provide us with a structured approach at all those elements which are there in the auditing and the accounting standards that need to be covered in a particular audit. So we have got our Excel templates, we've got our audit checklist, definitely we have them, but the solution provides us with a methodology of capturing the evidences at that particular stage on, creating all those linkages and so on, and also gives us a bird's eye view on the comprehensiveness of the coverage that is there. So using templates gives us that flexibility on. The assurance and the completeness is there because we have got a comprehensive list with us. And if any element has not been completed, right, there is no element in the engagement which can remain at the time of closure, which has not been approved. Okay, so that assures us that everything is complete. And if something is not complete, we can immediately pinpoint those elements that have not been completed, and we can identify the materiality of that element and its impact on our reporting overall. The data integrity in terms of the trial balance data is extremely strong because we import the data from the trial balance directly. And once having imported, all our calculations that are there, the lead sheets, the ratio analysis, and everything else is all captured and it's automatically populated based on the templates available. So from an audit team perspective, we don't have to think through whether the data has been correctly populated, the ratios have been calculated properly or not, and so on and so forth. A one-time mapping activity ensures that all the data is accurately taken up. The other element is about linkage. There will be a lot of working that we would need to do in the field when we are calculations, subgroupings, schedules, the ultimate financial statements, and so on. And it all flows from this trial balance data on. So there is a connector which allows the seamless data linkage from the working papers into a Word document or an Excel document. So the element of data integrity is built into this particular process. And it also helps the teams to be more efficient because they don't have to spend their time trying to validate things, trying to see that everything is okay or not, recalculate things, and so on. A lot of those elements, particularly in a limited review environment perspective, I bring the trial balance in, I've got a comparison across 2 years or 2 periods, or I can go up to 5 periods or 5 years. And I can get a broad spectrum of the data which is there with the variations computed, percentages worked out, and so on and so forth. So the data integrity and efficiency are elements which happens with the numbers as such. There are certain standardized templates or engagement masters which can be created according to industry, sector, and size. And any new engagement can build on that particular thought which has been established once. There is a superior management of the audit risk. So in the financial system, financial area as such, financial statement areas, there is a scoping which is based on materiality and the risk for material misstatement. So based upon the risk and the control that has been captured and the materiality scoping that has been done, there is an automatic population of the sheet which allows you to then compute and see what level of checking we want to do subsequently, what level of substantive test we want to take it up subsequently, and so on and so forth. So it's a very scientific process that is evidenced and documented as we are going through that audit process. it's intuitive. We all know how the audit has to be done. So working through the working paper solution is very intuitive. I want to do this. Yes, there is a checklist. I want to update this. Yes, it is there. I want to evidence it. Yes, I can attach this evidence over here, and so on and so forth. It's very intuitive. You don't have to spend a lot of time trying to learn the things out. The document approvals and the flexibility, and this is the beauty over here. Now, in an audit engagement, like we said, there would be hundreds, I mean, practically thousands of documents on. Now, not all documents would be required to be reviewed at a partner level. Not all documents may require a particular sign-off to happen also. Now, once we have a broad system identified, once we have a broad, I would say, a structure identified on who should be approving what documents. So in a typical scenario, let's take an example. You might have a scenario where there's a 4-level team member is there. So you've got the junior member, you've got a senior auditor, you've got a manager, and you've got a partner. Now, it's not that all documents have to be signed by all the 4 team members. You would have some documents which does not require a sign-off. You would have some documents which may require just a 2-level sign-off. You may require some with 3 and some with 4, right? Now, it's possible to set up these sign-off role sets. Now, once we set up the sign-off role sets for that document line item, and we go back to the element of the engagement masters, so we can set this up one line. We can set this up on who should be signing what as per a size-specific engagement, and then it just flows through. So if any document is unsigned, is unapproved as per the expected role set, it would be an incomplete document. And there are filters, there are pointed reviews possible through filters by which we can immediately isolate all those documents based on what elements or what conditions we have put over there. So there are some standard conditions available. There's also the flexibility of having your own conditions put in and do a pointed review of things on. There's clarity on instructions. Now, typically what happens in today's environment is there would be verbal communications taking place. There would be instructions given at a point of time. So the partners come to a meeting and they give instructions on what needs to be done and done. So teams are expected to note it down. And subsequent review meeting, they would be saying what's the status on. So there is a potential or there is a possibility of missing out on the completion of some of these instructions, some of these review notes that we have done and so on and so forth. Now, all of these elements are protected through formalization of this communication on. So there's clarity on what was told to whom, what was expected from them, by when was it to be done, whether I want to continue with this note into the next engagement or next year's engagement and so on and so forth. So all of these elements are possible to be reviewed and to be looked at. There's a seamless data linkage. I've already talked about the connector over here. There's ability to work offline and there is a synchronization also possible whenever you go offline and there's a conflict resolution. And this becomes possible due to the SmartSync technology that is there on. So using the SmartSync technology, when there are 5 team members, 4 team members, 15 team members on a particular engagement, there will be a single state of truth. Anyone who has got access to the engagement as per the access rights that they have will be seeing the latest updated copy with them. Unless somebody is working with an offline copy, whenever they come online, it will get updated on. But in an online live environment, there is a single state of truth. Everyone, all the team members are looking at the same thing. No longer does the partner need to wait. They will have an easy review because they can just log in anytime they want. They can look at it and they can follow up with the team members through the review notes and so on and so forth. So there's a single state of truth. It becomes easy for reviews and follow-ups. And the collaboration is using the cloud internally amongst audit teams and externally with clients. So no longer do I need to send an email. Clients are made collaborators for that engagement, and using the functionality in the cloud, I can raise file requests. The clients can log into the portal and they can update their files and so on and so forth. They don't need licensing. They can become a part of the engagement and they can work on that. And last but not the least is the history. There is an audit trail available of all the steps that have been performed by the audit team members, and it is as elaborate as it can be. So there's a continuous insight into who's done what, where, and so on and so forth. There are placeholders to keep from a completeness, but this is where the whole element is. So looking at, if you have to do a comparison between a typical manual environment of a Word and Excel versus a systems environment, a system environment comes in with significantly large number of benefits, which gives peace of mind to an audit team member, to an audit leader, firm leader, in terms of what has happened, what has been done. Is it okay? Is it done as per the firm standards? Is it comprehensive? Is it complete? Are we signing and attesting documents based on what exists over there? Can we project and can we demonstrate to the larger world our quality, our audit quality, our evidences that is there, and so on and so forth? Absolutely to the T on. So this is where we look at the solution helping us to primarily ensure comprehensive audit coverage. So when we look at the CaseWare as a solution, and this is a schematic largely, right? So essentially, once we create an engagement and we publish it to the cloud or publish it to the SmartSync server, everyone works on a child copy. Everyone works on a child copy. So whatever changes are done, and wherever the person is, whether the person is at home, whether the person is at a client location, whether the person is in office, whatever work is being done is getting synchronized live. And each one of them is seeing the updated copy of that particular engagement wherever they are, right? So that's where the cloud element basically works through, or the SmartSync element works through overall. Okay. And you can also from the office coordinate with the client, which through the cloud would get into the person over there. Do we have any questions till now before I get into the solution overview? Okay. We'll just get into the solution overview then, and we can have a quick 5-minute review of what's available on the. Okay. What we have here is the CaseWare Working Paper interface that you can see on. This is the desktop version that we are looking at. Okay. Just give me a moment. Okay. So we have the CaseWare Working Paper. This is the desktop, like I said, and you have an engagement. So you create an engagement. There is the engagement properties. You define the engagement properties that you may have. It could be for a particular period. So you could have the engagement created for a quarter, like a limited review and so on. It could be annual or it could be random. And in a random, you can set up whatever periods you want. So it's flexible in terms of the way that you are doing it. It is connected to the cloud entity that is associated. So the integration happens from there. So we've got these engagement properties that forms the base for that. Now, in a template, typically, we may have an Ind AS based audit, or we may have an IGAP based audit, or we may do a trust and so on and so forth, where no structure may be there. Now, the template comes with 3 profiles. So you can use the profile based upon the type of engagement that we are working upon. Now, typically in an Ind AS engagement, there are 4 folders primarily there. You've got the engagement file setup. There is a risk assessments phase. There is a risk response phase and a reporting phase. Now, whatever document comes in over here, right, would all form a part of the working paper index. So the indexation of a paper is automatically. You don't have to spend time doing that. Okay. In case you do not want a document to be a part of an index, then you have got an option of flagging that off and saying, I don't want it to be a part of it. Okay. In terms of looking at the entire thing, there are keyboard controls available for management also. So if I want to expand on a particular level, I can expand directly for the whole level through a simple keyboard shortcut as such. So keyboard shortcuts are integral, again, something to do with efficiency on. And a quick look at things on. So the first phase being the risk phase, risk assessment phase. And if you look at the preliminary engagement activities, there are specific pointers to the independence question as the pre-engagement activities. Are we able to see the working paper? No? Okay, just give me a moment. Yeah, I just hit those, so I am okay. Just give me a moment. I think you all are not able to see the screen, right? See. Okay. Just give me a moment, please. I just hit the controls. See, there's nothing over here. Okay, let me join the meeting, but I'm already in the meeting, right? No. So where is it from? I just hit those elements, that's all. I didn't do anything else. There's nothing over here to say, right? Just open the happens. No, I don't want to do it. I'll just say cancel. Just take back control and then see. Okay, let me leave the webinar and join back. Right?
Friends, thanks for being a bit patient with us. There's just a bit of a technical glitch in the speaker system. We're getting it resolved. We will be back online in a minute. So please don't leave the webinar. There is a solution overview demonstration, which is very, very important to this webinar, which is pending. So Mr. Manish Pipalia will be doing that very shortly. Just be with us.
Jairam, you can just activate the. Okay. Okay. So basically what I was sharing when we had this technical glitch was that we've got the structure over here, the engagement structure being created. We've got engagement properties in which you've got the option of the reporting dates. So we can have dates as per the period of audit that we are reviewing and we are working upon. It can be yearly, it can be random, and you can set up the periods as such which exist on. Now, largely, we have got this engagement file, which is comprehensive across 3 core phases. So there's the risk assessment phase, the risk response phase, and the reporting phase. And at each of the phases, we have got all the standards of auditing that are relevant getting covered over there on. So this essay checklist that you see, so in independence, you've got the questionnaire, and in the questionnaire, you've got those elements associated with the company law requirements of independence and certain standard expectations that are there. All of that listed out specifically in the questionnaire. In the pre-engagement activities, you've got this standard of auditing checklist for new client acceptance, the first engagement, the preliminary engagement, and so on. And if there are any changes and so on and so forth. So for each of the element, there is a very clear-cut summarization across in terms of what needs to be done. The second part in terms of preliminary being the planning the audit, again, understanding the entity. So you've got the standard of auditing checklist, you work with that, you bring in some external documents and so on and so forth. You've got materiality. Materiality is a very structured program that is provided wherein you put in feed in the data, you bring in the trial balance, the data of profit and so on gets fed in, and you look at the materiality numbers for what you want to take on. There are other considerations associated with it. All standards of auditing are included over here, right? You can then further fine tune and say you don't want certain elements and save it as a standard offering. And based on the same, from an audit strategy point of view, you would document how you are going to approach the audit, the team discussions, and so on and so forth. So all these elements associated with the planning of audit would be done. Then getting into the assessment procedures, the analytical procedures. Now, in this document, we've already got a particular trial balance imported. Now, based on that single import, you've got various graphs and ratios which are done and which are available for review. So if you look at this document over here, you've got all these ratios. You've got the Altman Z score for the going concern, and you've got all the others. So they are computed automatically. There's a comparison with the last year if you've got the figures on. So this is a 3-year compare of the numbers that we see over here. So all of these ratios are computed automatically based upon the import that has been done, right? Similarly, on import, you've got an immediate analytical review by lead sheet document taken place. So across groups that are there, and you could see as per group or as per accounts, you've got the current year's balance, you've got the last year's balance, you've got the variation, and you've got the percentage variation. And at each stage, you can then attach your notes. So you can attach a note, you can annotate, you can link it to a new document, you can link it internally, you can do all of those things and create a closely integrated document or a work paper document that is there. Tick marks typically are not used today, but it's an extremely effective element or a feature in terms of ensuring that the cross linkages amongst the documents are properly evidenced and performed and so on and so forth. So lead sheet. Now, if you look at a typical limited review environment, I immediately get ideas about where I should be focusing upon to conclude things on. There is a consolidation activity. Now, there is an optimizer. Under the file setup, there is an optimizer. If we are doing a standalone audit and we don't want this elements associated with the consolidation, they will be done away with, right? But there is a consolidation tree available in terms of the consolidation that may be done on. There can be internal consolidation, that is different units of the same entity, or you could have multiple standalone financial statements being consolidated. Both are possible to be performed on. In terms of the implementation, as per the business cycles, you've got various system notes to be captured. Walkthroughs, these are placeholders. So you would have external documents replacing these placeholders. And you've got the risk report, the control report, and control testing. Now, if you just look at a particular, any one element, so let me just take up this program. So the CaseWare document is a typical document within the solution itself, which is taken up. Now, a CaseWare document essentially has got, so if you look at this checklist that we had, understanding the entity, there is a reference to the standard of auditing that is being built over here. And what are the objectives over here? The overall materiality as it has been arrived at is available as a reference point here itself. But the point that I wanted to say that if you're looking at obtain an understanding what are the nature, what is the significance, nature, and so on. If at this stage, at the assessment stage, you think that there is a risk, then you can add a risk here itself, right? So there is a complete format or a template for capturing all the relevant elements associated with the risk. Okay, whether it's significant and so on and so forth. And similarly, you can have a control documented and you can work on that. So again, different elements associated with the control like manual, automatic, frequency, key, and so on. And the evaluation details that are there, the test of control, and how is it associated across on that front. So all of this in terms of risk and control can be defined on. And that is what is available over here in the form of a risk report, a control report, and the testing worksheet. The testing worksheet would have the samples that have been taken up for reviews across various business lines that are there. Okay, and in this conclusion phase, and this is the core worksheet that we talk about in terms of the FSA or the financial statement areas that would be there on. It is a comprehensive document which starts from the accounts or disclosures or other matters considered significant being there. And then you get into the balances, you get into material assessment. Is it really material? Should we be taking up for audit? What are the assertions associated? What are the business cycles? The risk scores that are there? And what test are we going to be doing? So based on all of this, the materiality and the risk that we review, we decide whether we want to do a substantive analytical procedures, we want to do substantive procedures, and we further want to do further substantive procedures. Based on what we select over here, effectively then gets reflected in the risk response. So with this stage, with the risk assessment getting over, we come to the risk response stage. And in the risk response stage, we've got specific lead sheets, but more than that, we have the risk program. This is where we start capturing our work done. So if there's an external document, we will drag and drop it into this group over here, right? And for that group, we would then go about linking it to the specific line item of testing that we have done and so on. So this is the document that we see. And if we see there is a detailed audit response. So the elements that we saw in the FSA, we could uncheck them. If you have unchecked it over there, this will remain unchecked. And that particular element in the section below will not be active. Okay. So typically you've got the checklist which is defined in this form. You can modify this, you can add, you can delete, and you can do all of that. You've got results which can be captured. So there are certain results which are there. And then you've got the linkages. So here, when you say you want to annotate reference one, you can just link it to the reference to that particular document which you have brought in. So if you brought in, there is no specific document over here, but if whatever document you brought in, you can just link it straight away to that, and that reference will come in over here. Okay, so essentially what we are doing is we have got a checklist in place. And to this checklist, we are populating the status of the work done, and then we are attaching evidences to that. And we are signing that off, and there is an element which gets associated that it has been signed off. And there is an overall sign off that we do over here, which tells us that if it's complete or it's incomplete, it would highlight on that. There is certain role set which is there. So if you see, there is a default role set of 4 and there is a specific role set of 2. So whatever has been set up, you can just complete it on that ground. So as we go through these elements, that happens, you've got the issues over here. The issue is categorized into different elements. So I'll just open this one. I'll not take more than 5 minutes to close. So you've got a subject, you've got a type. So you categorize an issue as per different types. You assign it to one or more than one person on to perform the audit. You can attach a document or link that issue to a document, and you can have the status about what's the status, and all those unresolved issues you can retain on cleanup, you can give it a priority and so on. So this is what we say, and you can clear it over here. So there's a complete life to this. And if you want to focus on elements, and this filter is very powerful over here. So if you want to say directly documents with issues, or we want to say issues not cleared, then all of that would come in. So we've got this, there are no documents with issues over here. So nothing is there. If there are any external documents, we get to see all those external documents being listed out over here. And these are all the external documents that are there that we can review it out. So there is this external document here, and we can do that. And we can go back to none. We just want to look at the lead sheets. We can just click on the lead sheets, and all the lead sheets would be there. This feature is so powerful that it makes the user extremely efficient when they are working on things on. If there's something completed, we can just look at the fully completed documents where all signatures that are necessary are available. And we could look at those uncompleted documents, and we have got all the list of that on. So we can have a comprehensive and a direct insight into the status using all of these predefined things, and you've got the sign-offs. So these are some of the elements. You go through the entire process of mapping. History is one element, like we said. So whatever access has been done. So if we've accessed something at this point of time, it would be available. So we accessed the file on 11/5 at 501. I had accessed this. I've got a possibility of comparing it across milestones. So if I've done some work at a point of time, I can save that as a milestone, and any further work that has been done can be compared at the two, and it could be done. Typically, if I've imported the trial balance once and there's a new trial balance coming in, I want to see what is the changes between the two. I would save all the data for the first trial balance, and then as a milestone, bring in the second one, compare, and do it overall. So we can import data using Excel and so on. Once we have done with it and we are complete, the third phase is complete. We then get into year-end close and roll forward. So effectively, once we do the year-end close and roll forward and we lock down, the file becomes a read-only file and everything is there. If anybody wants any of these elements to be shared, you can just export the engagement. You can be specific in what you want to export, and you can filter as per the export, and you would have a document which is there on that front. So this is a complete file export, and it will all get exported as a PDF file. All your Word, Excel documents will get converted to PDF. In an Excel file, if it is large, it will get covered into 2 pages and so on and so forth. So this in a nutshell is the solution that we are talking about. There is the cloud bit, which allows you to also connect. And it has got the collaboration activities. I'll take a break over here. In case there are any questions, we can take that.
Thank you, Manishi. Friends, there was a very insightful walkthrough of a very powerful tool for external auditors, solution for external auditors. We can take a minute. If there are any questions, you can place it in the chat box, or if I can request Manishi, if you can place your mail ID in the chat, then if they have any questions, they can also write into you offline with what they've seen in the webinar today. Plus, this webinar will be recorded and available on the SAMA YouTube channel from tomorrow morning. So you can always revisit the recording and look at the presentation once again. And the email ID has been shared, so you can take note of that. Any questions, friends? So I think it's okay. There's a question from Rajesh. How do we balance the timeline challenge with this application?
Okay. Rajesh, there are two parts over here. The timeline challenge is driven by the client expectation. The entire emphasis over here is that there are various elements which adds to the time. Validating the numbers, ensuring that the numbers are proper and accurate at all points of time. That is a core thing which gets done away through the software. The moment you are importing the TB at a point of time, and you're importing it again, you would be looking at the element that the data is automatically populated and updated. So there is no need to do that. You have got a financial statement template which you have defined with the notes to accounts and so on. You bring in a TB and the numbers would really flow into all of that element on. So one, the data integrity element, the accuracy element, there's no need to do a rework on that, recheck on that. That's one element which gets taken care of. Second, when you are looking at the data, receiving the data based on which you are concluding certain matters on, right? Now, when you are interacting with the client is promising you that I'll be sharing this information with you. This is, you take it as done. Now, typically when we are signing off, we don't have the insight whether that information has come or not at all for all the matters that are there. We might have a manual note or a track of that against which we could be doing it. In this case, you have got a placeholder there in the engagement, and you can shortlist on all those placeholders that are there. Now, based on that, you are able to negotiate and work with the client in a much more efficient manner and thereby manage your time pressures that are there on. The third element, when you talk about the time pressures and documentation, it is possible to simply scan your handwritten notes and place it in the appropriate folder at that point of time itself. It's not necessary that you would need to make a beautiful file note then and there itself. At the same time, not leave the file note making to memory subsequent to the end of the engagement. So you have the possibility of just scanning that note and putting it over there on whatever is there. Okay. And then you can build on that on. So when it comes to time pressures, generally the time pressure is in terms of the extent of audit that you want to do. Now, once you follow and once you have a high level risk review done, you've had a look at the control done, the quantum of substantive tests that you need to do, right, can be gauged and can be managed better. And it would also enable you to handle that. So there are different elements associated or different features available through which you can manage your time better. Let's say you want to intervene as a senior, right? You've got that filter where you have got a comprehensive insight into the engagement entirely at all points of time. So you could use those filter and see what's my level of completion, boys, right? And you could take a call on that and say, okay, this is the completion level. How can we expedite? How can we do things better without losing out on the effectiveness of the audit process? So the ad hocism, I would say the approach is that much more structured and effective when it comes to being hassled for completion. You have got a tool which enables you to provide that insight that yes, this is where I am, and a conscious call can be taken on what needs to be done. So these are certain elements of the time pressures overall.
Thank you, Manish, for sharing those insights. Friends, it's very nice. Thank you for being with us. I would like to thank our speaker for this evening, Mr. Manish Pipalia, and look forward to engaging with you all again on the coming Wednesday, where we have the next Analytics Wednesday event. So please stay connected, and thank you once again for being with us. I wish everyone a good evening ahead, and thank you. Thank you, Manish.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.